What comes to mind when you hear the name Chad? Allow me to guess. Charming, charismatic, and facial perfection. But there's something more. White. Yes, that's the stereotype. White skin, westernized, Eurocentric. Yet, I see a world of color. It's time to redefine what it means to be a Chad. In a world with hundreds of unique phenotypes where only a fraction of the world's population is of Caucasian descent, it's a grievous mistake that people believe that their ethnicity must align with the conventional Chad to succeed. Welcome to Chadified, where every ethnicity possesses the potential for Chadification. If you want to get your face analyzed with looks-maxing suggestions and Chadification done to your own unique circumstance, taking your ethnicity into consideration, check out the link in the description, chadified.me. Approximately 200,000 years ago, the modern human species, Homo sapiens, emerged in sub-Saharan Africa. Today, we embark on a journey that commences on the very soil that birthed human existence. We will not only explore each ethnicity, but also consider how to enhance one's appearance based on it. Each path here signifies the unique routes humans took as they traveled across Earth, color-coded by each continent. The countdown at the bottom of the screen indicates the current year being displayed. Our individual genetics and heritage play a significant role in shaping our physical appearance. Ethnicity matters because people from diverse backgrounds exhibit varying traits, necessitating tailored looks-maxing protocols. Standard rating criteria like the conventional Chad rating system faces challenges when applied to individuals from distant regions outside of Europe. In fact, even across America, faces can display strikingly different appearances. One size doesn't fit all, and at Chadify, we recognize this reality. In our previous installments of this series, we delved into the realm of male facial attractiveness across the continents of Africa, Europe, Asia, and Oceania. Rather than simplistically categorizing these regions as single races, solely defined by the labels of black and white, I developed a more accurate approach that recognizes the diverse array of phenotypes present on each continent. But what even is a phenotype? Well, a phenotype is a set of observable characteristics of an organism, which is determined by genetics and influenced by the environment. When two or more different phenotypes exist in the same population of a species, the species is now called polymorphic. We are, as humans, polymorphic. There are 4 different types of phenotypic traits. Morphological phenotypic traits are physical traits that are observable. In humans, traits like height, eye color, and other facial features. We're concerned with morphology. There are 17 morphological phenotypic traits involved in our analysis, each varying significantly across phenotypes. And there are hundreds of unique phenotypes, but we will be focusing on the main 45 of them. As you can see, this complexity surpasses the conventional categorization of a handful of races. In this video, we transition to our exploration of America and find a parallel to our observations back in Africa, Europe, Asia, and Oceania. We're gonna zoom in to our first phenotype. Wow. There he is. In my opinion, facial attractiveness is objective in aggregate. This means that while it is entirely subjective from person to person, given a large enough sample size, it becomes predictive by nature. This is the system that I implemented to create and define Chads. The following relationships must be satisfied. First of all, facial averageness. Morphing images from various individuals within a specific group can create a representation of facial averageness for that region. And a great example is what this guy did here. These are 6 different individuals which averaged together to create this guy. Objectively, from my my own analysis, the guy in the middle is the most attractive by far out of the 6 of them, yet all 6 of those guys are not attractive. So when you put it all together, you end up with a very attractive face. So I can go and I can target a specific phenotype and average together hundreds of faces to create a great looking, attractive face from the region. However, that is not enough to fully tap out facial attractiveness, which leads us to Chadification, modifying an averaged face by enhancing its dimorphic traits and overall aesthetic markers results in a Chadified phenotype. And that is how I created 45 and counting Chad phenotypes of the world. Our initial phenotype is the Eskimid phenotype Chad. The Eskimid phenotype represents the northernmost group of ethnicities in the world and exhibits the most advanced adaptations to polar climates. Native to regions spanning from eastern Siberia to Greenland, these populations develop physical traits specifically suited for extreme cold. Adaptations include short, stocky, and thick-set bodies with compact limbs, a very narrow nasal aperture to warm, cold inhaled air, and exceptionally strong masticatory muscles. Unlike more southerly native groups, Eskimid peoples arrived in the Americas through relatively recent migrations from North Asia just a few millennia ago. Brian Nikolai, who also goes by Ukilak, is a Yupik musician from Toksook Bay, Alaska, singing in his indigenous Yupik language. You can see he's notably that of the Eskimid phenotype. The term Eskimo is a historically used but now controversial exonym that broadly refers to 2 closely related indigenous peoples of the Arctic regions of North America and Siberia. The Inuit, which includes the Alaska Native Inupiat, the Canadian Inuit, and the Greenlandic Inuit, as well as the Yupik or Inuit of eastern Siberia in Alaska. While still used in some regions, the term has largely been replaced in Canada and Greenland by more culturally appropriate identifiers. However, for the purpose of our physical morphology in this video, the Eskimid phenotype name has been retained for purely classification purposes. It's also worth noting that although in these Arctic regions total population is very low in density, aka there's not many people who live in these areas, the portion of indigenous people occupying such land as a percentage is much higher, notably Greenland, with 89.7% of people identifying as indigenous according to recent data from 2023. The Inupiat are Inuit of northern Alaska. Their language is Inupiaq, and their territory includes Utqiagvik, the northernmost US city located above the Arctic Circle. So on to the facial analysis of the Eskimid phenotype. First of all, they have a fair to light brown skin tone with a yellowish, slightly red tint. Additionally, they have a low quantity of body hair, and they have coarse, straight hair very similar to a lot of the East Asian phenotypes. They have black hair color on average, and an eye color which is typically dark brown. They have forward set, squinty eye proportions on average of 3.3 width to 1 height, and they have very pronounced epicanthic folds. This is our evolutionary migratory path of humans. You can see it as they go across the Bering Strait there, and people populate North and South America. Notably, the Eskimid regions are the final regions for people to kind of cross over there. This means that there's East Asian admixture present in all of North and South America. Here is the population graph of the Eskimid phenotype, areas where there's high East Asian admixture, meaning that epicanthic folds are commonplace. They have average eye spacing yet small eye size. They have 115% of one eye width apart for their eye spacing index. Yet, if you look at their ES ratio, it's 0.445. If anything, slightly on the closer set side. Additionally, the Eskimid phenotype typically has a nasal index in the ballpark of 72, meaning they have a leptorrhine to mesorrhine nose, a slightly narrow nose width. Additionally, they have low nasal projection. Here's a side profile of an Inuit male. His nose and his midface don't project out that far. They're chemicranic, meaning that they are short-skulled, and they're dolichocephalic to mesocephalic. This means that their cephalic index typically is below 80%, and when this is the case, it means that they're deep to medium skulled. Additionally, the the Eskimid phenotypes are meso to Euriprosopic with a facial index typically in the region of 83%. This means that they have a slightly broad face. Their mid-face ratio has a moderate range. Kind of similar to East Asians, there's a huge variance here, meaning that Eskimid phenotype individuals can have anywhere from a 1-to-1 compact midface all the way to 1.1. They have thin to medium lip size and a long philtrum of 1.9 chin length to 1 philtrum length, as well as strong masticatory muscles as I mentioned earlier, leading to a very well-developed jaw. Eskimid phenotypes are relatively short and they're macroskeletal, meaning they have a long torso and short limbs, again, both adaptations to a colder climate where you need to retain more body heat. Finally, the Eskimid phenotype is large-framed and muscular. Here we go from a more masculine-looking Eskimid all the way to the prettier counterpart, equally attractive and differing in unique ways. Us humans range in dimorphism. Some of us contain more morphological masculinity than others, and that is totally fine and is what makes our faces so incredibly unique. And on to the Pacifid phenotype, which is a Native American morphological group indigenous to the Pacific coast of the United States and Canada. Quick haircut to get things cleaned up. This group primarily traces its ancestry back to the late Paleolithic and Neolithic migrations from East Asia, representing one of the early waves of human settlement into North America as opposed to the Eskimid. Ethnic groups associated with the Pacifid phenotype historically inhabited a region stretching from southern Alaska through coastal British Columbia and down into northern and central California. Among the most representative peoples, Wakashan speaking groups such as the Nukanoth and Kwakwaka'wakw, and the Salishan speaking groups, including Coast Salish, Nlaka'pamuk, and Shuswap. Huso Takam, also known as Gabrielle Clark Faust, and his brother Raphael Kotol, both have large followings on Instagram where they focus on education and cultural awareness, particularly for indigenous and minority communities around the world. You can see they're very attractive, and they definitely resemble that of the Pacifid phenotype Chad. Pacific coastal groups, like the Kwakwaka'wakw, preserve their traditional lifeways longer than many other indigenous peoples due to delayed European contact, since they're more on that western side. Known for their potlatch ceremonies, carved masks, and iconic totem poles. Totem poles are monumental wooden carvings traditionally created by indigenous peoples of the Pacific Northwest coast. Carved from large cedar trees, there are in fact several distinct types of poles, each with its own purpose. Contrary to popular belief, totem poles are not religious idols, they are visual records, deeply symbolic monuments that preserve lineage, history, and cultural identity through generations. This is the Lincoln totem pole, carved by the Tlingit people in the late 1800s. It was created to commemorate Abraham Lincoln and mark the end of hostilities between two rival Tlingit clans. Wawaditla, also known as the Mungo Martin House, is a traditional Kwakwaka'wakw big house located in Thunderbird Park in Victoria, British Columbia. Salish weaving created from mountain goat hair, woolly dog fur, wool and plant fibers has been a sacred art for centuries among Coast Salish peoples. On to the facial analysis of the Pacifid phenotype Chad. A quick side note, guys. Most Native American phenotypes, excluding the Eskimid, tend to exhibit relatively high forehead inclination and more pronounced brow ridges, particularly among the Pacifid, Margid, and Silvid types. This is a key morphological distinction between East Asian and Native American phenotypes. It also helps explain why individuals of mixed East Asian and European ancestry, often referred to colloquially as Wasians, may sometimes exhibit facial features that resemble Native American morphology. Pacifid individuals typically have a light brown skin tone with a yellowish red tint. Out of all the native phenotypes, they typically have the most body hair. Moving on, they have coarse, straight to slightly wavy hair. There's a bit of a variation there. And they have dark brown hair color, though it's sometimes lighter. Additionally, they have dark brown eyes on average. Obviously, there's always going to be some variation here. These are just averages. And they have eye dimensions which are middle set and squinty, with a 3.5 width to 1 height. Compared to the Eskimids, their epicanthic folds are not as pronounced. However, they obviously also have East Asian admixture, as noted on our map here. Moving on, they have average eye spacing of 109% of one eye width apart for their eye spacing ratio, yet an ES ratio of 0.46. On average, the Pacifid phenotype has a mesorrhine nose with a nasal index of 70, meaning that they have a medium nose width. Additionally, the Pacifid phenotype has low to moderate nasal projection. Here's a side profile shot of the Quaquaquawic chief Willie Seaweedy. Moving on, they're chemicranic to orthocranic. This means they have short to medium skull height. They have a brachycephalic ratio, meaning that they're shallow skulled, and they're meso to euryprosopic, meaning they have a slightly or relatively broad face with a facial index of 80%. Moving on average, they have a 1.05 to 1 mid-face ratio, meaning they have a slightly long mid-face, and they have slightly thin lips. They have a long philtrum of 1.8 chin length to 1 philtrum length, and an angular jaw with a large pronounced chin. Very chiseled features. They're medium height to tall, and they're macro to mesoscalic, meaning that they have a slightly longer torso, yet relatively long arms, so that's an interesting thing right there. And finally, they're medium to large framed. So here's a more masculine Pacifid guy, all the way over to the more pretty boy version. And I'm sure you guys have noticed in society and in public that there's lots of men out there that have more masculine faces and prettier faces, and yet both can be very attractive in differing ways. And so let's go back to our map. And we're flying all the way over the plains to the Silvid phenotype, chat, named after silva, the Latin word for forest, reflecting their ancient woodland roots from adapting to life on the open plains. Also known as the Plainid type after the Great Plains of North America. Think tribes like the Lakota, Crow, and Blackfoot. Martin Sensmeyer is a Native American actor and model. Being that he's an Alaskan native, he's of Tlingit and Koyukon Athabascan descent. Although he is geographically from Alaska, his morphology aligns more closely with the Silvid phenotype than the Eskimid cluster, exhibiting more angular features and a longer facial structure. This highlights how genetics and human physical appearance often blends in a gradient-like form versus strict rigid categories. Sensmeyer is known for playing various Native American roles in the 2016 remake of The Magnificent Seven, and had a recurring role as Wanatun in the HBO television series Westworld. Derek Hinkey is a Native American actor and model and former professional boxer. I mean, look at that neck, it's so wide. He's a citizen of the Fort McDermott Paiute and Shoshone tribes of Fort McDermott Indian Reservation. And you can see how the Paiute regions are a little more overlapped with the Silvid regions. Plains tribes like the Lakota, Crow, and Blackfoot wore eagle feather war bonnets as sacred symbols of honor, bravery, and leadership. Each feather represented a specific act of valor and had to be earned. Keep in mind that only respected leaders and warriors wore them, making them both spiritual regalia and markers of status. So now onto the facial analysis of the Silvid phenotype. So they typically have fair to light brown skin, a bit lighter than the other two groups, with a yellowish red tint. They have a low quantity of body hair, and they have straight hair which is sometimes wavy. They have a hair color which ranges from dark brown to black. Known some individuals with this phenotype blend, key distinction blend, with lighter hair. Their eye color on average is dark brown, and they have eye dimensions which are typically 3.5 width to 1 height, meaning that their squinty eye proportion is in their middle set because they're closer to the forward region of the face. They have occasional epicanthic folding, here's our map again, of East Asian admixture. Their population has a ton of overlap. They have slightly close set to average eye spacing with 100% of one eye width apart for their eye spacing index, yet an ES ratio of 0.45 and sometimes even lower. They have a nasal index on average of 67, meaning that they're slightly leptorrhine, slightly narrow nose width, and they have low to moderate nasal projection. The Silvid phenotype individuals typically are chemicranic to orthocranic, meaning that they have a short to medium skull height, and their cephalic ratio is mesocephalic, meaning that they have a medium skull depth. They're mesoprospic with an 84% facial index, meaning that they have a medium face width, and sometimes it does lean on the broader side. And they have a slightly long mid-face of 1.06 length to 1 width. This is very common for a lot of natives to be on the slightly longer mid-face area. The Silvid phenotype typically is thin to medium lip size, and they have a slightly long philtrum of 2 chin length to 1 philtrum length. I guess I would call this a balanced chin in many cases, but it's definitely a little bit longer. They have a massive jaw overall, and they're quite tall. Lakota men specifically were historically known for their height, with some individuals being exceptionally tall. While the average height for Plains native men in the 1800s was around 5'8", some Lakota men, particularly warriors, were reported to be over 6 feet tall. A notable example is Chief Touch the Clouds, who was said to stand at 6'9". For that time period, this was considered exceptionally tall, placing him well into the upper range of stature for any population globally. Look at those cheekbones, holy crap. They're also typically mesoskeletal, meaning they have a balanced torso length. That's more common when you get taller. Legs typically become more proportional with the rest of your body. And they're medium to large frame. So here's the more masculine Silvid all the way to the more pretty boy individual. Alright, so back to our map. Boom. The Margid phenotype, which represents a Native American phenotype group, originally native to the semi-deserts and dry forests stretching from California to northern Mexico. This group is considered relatively ancient, having likely arrived during one of the first Paleolithic migrations into the Americas. Over time, Silvid and Centralid influences, along with European colonization, dramatically reduced the prevalence of the pure Margid type. However, the Margid lineage remains highly influential, especially within the admixed Mexican population. Tenoch Huerta is of indigenous descent. His maternal great-grandmother was Nahua, and his paternal great-great-grandmother was Pura Picha. Huerta closely resembles the Margid phenotype. While his facial features align strongly with this type, it's possible that there is some admixture with other ancestral groups, since his full genetic background is not publicly documented. Another example is Rick Mora, who is a Native American actor and model of Apache and Yaqui descent, representing indigenous roots from southwestern US and northern Mexico. Morphologically and geographically, he aligns with the Margid phenotype. Another notable actor of the Margid phenotype is Rudy Youngblood, best known for his role as Jaguar Parr in Apocalypto 2006, directed by Mel Gibson. While this film portrays a character from the Mayan civilization as more closely aligned with the Centralid phenotype, Youngblood himself states that he is of Comanche and Yaqui descent. Genetically and morphologically, these groups are more consistent with the Margid phenotype. The indigenous civilizations of Mesoamerica followed one of the most divergent cultural trajectories in the world, sharing little with Western traditions. Mexico today is incredibly diverse, home to hundreds of indigenous groups and a wide range of terrains. The north is dry and desert-like, while the south features tropical rainforests and humid lowlands, with highland plateaus and grasslands in between. And unlike the United States, where Native Americans make up less than 1% of the population, most Mexicans have majority Native ancestries, and nearly 20% are still fully blooded indigenous. That's why Mexico is so central to our analysis. So showcased in this Mesoamerican map here are the homelands of major Mesoamerican civilizations such as the Olmec, Maya, and Zapotec. One of the main groups were the Aztecs, also known as the Mexica. They are among the most prominent representatives of the Margid phenotype. Their capital, Tenochtitlan, was built on Lake Texcoco, now Mexico City, and became the largest city-state in the Americas by 1500 AD. The Aztecs ruled a militaristic empire supported by tributary states and large-scale human sacrifice. Eventually, they were conquered by Hernan Cortes in 1523 through alliances, disease, and siege warfare. This marked the fall of the last great Mesoamerican civilization prior to Spanish colonization. They believed that the gods had sacrificed themselves to create the world, and in return humans were obligated to repay this debt through offerings of blood. Worship of the sun god, who they feared would not rise each day without nourishment from human hearts. This belief wasn't born from cruelty, but from a worldview in which the universe was unstable, cyclical, and required constant human effort to remain balanced. These rituals may have been intensified by generational memory of traumatic events, such as droughts, societal collapses, or invasions. The Aztecs believed they were living in the time of the fifth sun, the latest in a series of cosmic eras, each of which ended in disaster. The Mesoamerican concept of beauty was culturally centered around intentional forms of bodily deformation. Think extreme jewelry, piercings, and cranial reshaping, all used as expressions of status and aesthetic ideal. The Templo Major, or main temple, was built by Mexica, the Aztecs, in their capital city, Tenochtitlan. And so here's a quick model reconstruction of the Templo Major, pretty incredible stuff. Now we're looking at the Pyramid of the Sun, and unlike the Templo Major, this pyramid was likely built between 100 BC and 550 BC by an unknown civilization, possibly ancestral to the Toltecs, and was already abandoned by the time the Aztecs rose to power. They named it Teotihuacan, meaning the place where the gods were created. Seeing it as a cosmic origin of the world, the Aztecs used its vast temples, like the Pyramid of the Sun and the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, for pilgrimages and rituals meant to sustain the universe through offerings of blood. Much of the Mesoamerican life was built on inheritance, rituals, cities, and myths passed down from lost peoples whose names we may never know. So on to the facial analysis of the Margid phenotype. They have medium to dark brown skin with a red tint. They have a low quantity of body hair, and they have a hair texture which is coarse to fine, straight. They have hair color which is black typically, and an eye color which is dark brown. Their eye dimensions are typically almond eye proportions. They have a rounder eye than some of the other phenotypes with a 3 width to 1 height and middle set, and they have infrequent epicanthic folds. If we take a look once more at our map here, we're going to see that the East Asian admixture is present in all the Americas, meaning when you plot their population graph, it's admixed. They have close set eye spacing with 110% of one eye width apart for their eye spacing index, so meaning a smaller eye size slightly, because it's not near that 100% area. And they have a 0.435 ES ratio, meaning they have slightly close set eyes as well. Their nasal index is 72, meaning that they have a mesorine nose, a medium nose width, and they have moderate nasal projection. The Margids are typically hypsocranic, meaning they're tall skulled, and they have a cephalic ratio which is mesocephalic all the way to dolichocephalic, meaning that they're medium to deep skulled. They're mesoprospic with an 84% facial index, medium face width, and they have a long midface of 1.09 length to 1 width. They have slightly thin lips, and they have a long philtrum of 1.9 chin length to 1 philtrum length. A lot of these natives have long philtrums and long midfaces. They have average jaw development, a little bit smaller compared to the other native phenotypes, and they're rather short, with macro to mesoscelic proportions, meaning that they have a slightly long dorsal length. Finally, the Margids are small to large frame. They have a huge range. There's many that are very big and wide and very small. So here we go from the more masculine looking Margid all the way over to the more pretty boy individual, equally attractive in differing dimorphism ways. Boom. What a cool looking picture. I know people that look all across this spectrum. And so back to our map. Now let's fly even more south to the Centralid phenotype Chad, which is a central Native American group found in the population stretching from the southern United States down through Mexico and into parts of Central and Northern South America, including Colombia. This type developed through partial adaptation to humid subtropical environments. Prior to European contact, the Centralid type was common amongst ancient civilizations such as the Maya. Although wars, disease, and admixture significantly reduced the number of pure Centralids, the phenotype continues to play a prominent role in the modern gene pool of Mesoamerican and Central American populations today. Enric Salanic is a Guatemalan actor best known for his role in Jose. Born in Cantal, Guatemala, Enric exemplifies the classic features of the Centralid phenotype. There is a notable crossover between the Margid and Centralid phenotypes, meaning certain aspects of Aztec culture and appearance are reflected in the Centralid. A more prominent group associated with the Centralid phenotype is the ancient Maya civilization, who were also known for wearing elaborate headdresses as part of their ceremonial and elite attire, hence our visual depiction on the right, and these incredible Mayan murals of Bonampak. But let's take a step back in time. The first civilization to emerge in Mesoamerica was the Olmec, a cultural group that extended from central Mexico to near the Isthmus of Panama. The Olmec were also known as the rubber people, referring to the rubber trees that flourished in their region. They traditionally wore skirts or breech cloths woven from cotton and adorned themselves with earrings, nose rings, bracelets, necklaces, and anklets made of jade, shell, or bone. The Olmec are known for their colossal stone heads. Here's a picture of one of them. Some of the earliest ceremonial pyramids, and a cultural influence that later shaped all Mesoamerican civilizations, like literally all of them. Having a very strong influence on the Yucatan Peninsula, after the decline of the Olmec, their cultural legacy flowed into the emerging civilizations such as the Zapotec and Epi-Olmec, eventually laying the groundwork for the rise of the Maya. The classic period marked the height of the powerful Maya city-states like Tikal, Copan, Palenque, and Calakmul. During this era, the Maya became renowned for their achievements in writing, mathematics, astronomy, and art, establishing one of the most advanced civilizations in the ancient Americas. In fact, if we take a look at this artistic reconstruction of ancient Mayan cities, we can really see how incredible it likely was. And by the 10th century AD, the Yucatan Peninsula was home to millions. Recent LiDAR surveys revealed nearly 1,000 ancient settlements, including 417 previously unknown cities hidden beneath the jungles of northern Guatemala and southern Mexico. Researchers also uncovered the fact that they might have had the world's first highway network, over 110 miles of raised stone roads, some of which were 130 feet wide. Today, if you drive through the region, it appears to be an endless forest, but beneath the canopy lies the remnants of an advanced civilization that once dominated the landscape. Something that many of you guys know is the Mayan calendar, which was one of the most advanced timekeeping systems in the ancient world, built around the circles of time rather than a linear timeline, and included a 260-day sacred calendar and a 365-day solar calendar, and a long count calendar used to track historical events across thousands of years. Marked major world cycles called Bactons, each lasting about 394 years. The end of the 13th Bacton in December 2012 led to modern fears of an apocalypse. Many of you guys probably remember that. In fact, there was even the movie 2012 based off of it. And here's one quick fun fact. The Mesoamerican peoples, most notably those in present-day southern Mexico, basically the Centralid group, genetically engineered corn thousands of years before the birth of Christ, well before the rise of civilizations like the Zapotecs, Mixtecs, and even the Olmecs. So, on to the facial analysis of the Centralid phenotype. First of all, they have a medium brown skin tone with a yellow tint. Less red than the Margid phenotype in terms of complexion and a little bit lighter, but still very tanned. They have a low quantity of body hair, and they have straight to slightly wavy hair texture. They have a hair color which is black on average, and eye color which is dark brown. Their eye dimensions are typically that of which 3.5 width to 1 height. They're on the side of the squintier proportion area, being middle set as well, and they have infrequent epicanthic folding, a little less than the other phenotypes of the Americas. However, they still have admixture. They have average eye spacing with 103% of one eye width apart, and they have an ES ratio of 0.47. Moving on, they have a mezzarine button-shaped nose. It's kind of small, it's medium set, sort of the nose that girls like these days, and they have low to moderate nasal projection. They're mildly hypsocratic, meaning that they're slightly tall in skull height, and they are brachycephalic to hyper brachycephalic, meaning they're very shallow skulled. They're hyper euryprosopic with a facial index of 80%, so you can see they have a very broad yet shallow skull appearance, and they have a compact mid-face of 1:1. This is like one of the few phenotypes of the Native Americas which is like this. They have relatively full lips, and they have a balanced chin philtrum ratio of 2 chin length to 1 philtrum length. This phenotype has a smaller philtrum, no doubt, compared to the other phenotypes of the indigenous America regions, but they do have a slightly shorter chin. That said, they have a wide jaw, and they're short to very short, rivaling that of the pygmies in certain areas. And they're macro to mesoscelic, meaning that they have a slightly longer torso on average. And finally, they're small to large frame, meaning that there's a huge range in terms of physiques and just width and size of these individuals. Alright, so on to the more masculine looking Centralid, and we're gonna morph all the way over to the pretty boy version. Equally attractive in differing ways. I really think this is helpful for you guys because everybody has a different level of dimorphism, so it's really important to take a look at this and wonder, where do you sit on the dimorphism scale for your given phenotype or phenotype blend if you're all over the place. And there's the hair, and we go back to our map. And now we fly all the way over to the Amazonid phenotype. The Amazonid phenotype refers to the Native American populations of the tropical lowland forests of South America. Like other native phenotypes, this group originated after crossing the Bering Strait and gradually migrated southward into South America. Over time, the Amazonid groups expanded through Amazonia, modern-day Brazil, and other parts of the Caribbean, becoming the dominant type in these regions before European contact. While many populations collapsed following colonization, several tribes continue to survive today. Key groups include the Tupi Guarani, Yanomami, Kayapo, Arawak, Ashaninka, and the Tikuna, and it's a very widespread group in these areas. The word cannibal comes from canibal, a Spanish term used after Columbus's second voyage in 1493 to describe the Carib people of the Caribbean. The Taino had warned the Spanish about the Carib as violent and possibly involved in ritual cannibalism. Columbus reported this and the term spread. Unlike the great civilizations of Mesoamerica or the Andes, Amazonic groups did not build large cities or empires. Instead, they lived in small villages or semi-nomadic camps organized around clans or local chiefs. Though lacking writing systems or monumental architecture, they developed advanced ecological knowledge. The Kayapo are an Amazonic group in central Brazil, living in clan-based villages. They're known for body paint, feathered headdresses, lip plates, and speaking the Agi language. About 8,500 live across dozens of villages, balancing tradition with modern resistance efforts. I think this is a great thing, as preserving these cultures is absolutely paramount, and we can learn a lot from these groups if we bring education towards them rather than taking it away. Davi Kopa Nawa Yanomami is a renowned Yanomami shaman and activist who has become a global voice for indigenous rights and rainforest protection in Brazil. On to the facial analysis of the Amazonid phenotype. Well, first of all, they have a medium brown, yellowish red skin tone on average. Secondly, they have a low quantity of body hair, very much similar to many of the Native American phenotypes. Thirdly, they have straight to wavy hair texture. Typically, it's a bit straighter, and it's black in color for the most part. In terms of eye color, it's typically a dark brown hue with eye dimensions which are 3.2 width to 1 height and middle set eyes, meaning they're not so far back in the skull per se, but they're not too forward set either. They infrequently have epicanthic folding. This is because, like all the other Native American phenotypes, there is some East Asian admixture. Moving on, they have average eye spacing yet small eye size. Due to 110% of one eye with the part for their eye spacing ratio, there's a bit more more than one eye width in between, insinuating small eyes, despite having an ES ratio of 0.46, which is very normal. Additionally, they have a nasal index of 77, meaning they have a mesorrhine nose. That's medium nose width with dilated nostrils, aka big nostrils. They're low to moderate in nasal projection, think side view of the face, and they're mildly hypsocranic, meaning they're slightly tall-skulled. Additionally, they're mesocephalic to brachycephalic, meaning that they're medium to deep-skulled, and they're meso to euryprosopic with a facial index of 83%. This means that they have a relatively broad face. They have a compact midface on average of 1.02 length to 1 width, and they have relatively full lips. They have a balanced chin-philtrum ratio of 2.05 to 1. Anything above 2 is typically balanced, with a relatively wide, soft jaw. They're short in height, and they're mesoscelic, meaning they have a balanced torso to limb length. Finally, they're small to large frame. There's a huge range in body types, the Amazonian groups. So here's a more masculine looking Amazonid individual, all the way over to the more pretty boy versions, both attractive with differing levels of dimorphism. And for reference, here is all three of them side by side so you can really capture what's going on. Back to our map. Towering over terraced mountainsides, the Andid phenotype stands. With physiological adaptations like larger lung capacity and a robust cardiovascular system, Andids are uniquely equipped to thrive in the thin air of the Andes Mountains. Like other Native Americans, this type developed through various Stone Age migrations across the Bering Strait. Beginning around 2000 BC, early Andean communities living between the Pacific coast and the Andes laid the foundation for civilization in South America. By around 8000 BC, the rise of Chavin de Huantar marked a new era of religious centralization, ceremonial architecture, and social organization, critical developments that would echo later through Andean civilizations. These cultural building blocks culminated in the Inca Empire, 1438 to 1533 CE, the most expansive and technologically sophisticated civilization in pre-Columbian South America was the Inca civilization. Centered in modern-day Peru, the Inca domain stretched across Ecuador, Bolivia, Chile, and Argentina, uniting the Andes under a highly organized imperial system supported by advanced agriculture, engineering, and infrastructure. And here's the ruins of Machu Picchu, an Inca citadel located in the Andes Mountains of Peru. Absolutely incredible sight to see one day. You guys gotta go see it. And here is Pachacuti Inca Yupanqui, who reigned from 1438 to 1471 and was the 9th Sapa Inca emperor of the Kingdom of Cusco and is widely recognized as the founder of the Inca Empire. Here's Roberto, a Quechua horseman, posing near Aswangati Mountain in the Andes. His portrait was featured in an article on indigenous culture and trekking traditions in the region. And you can unbelievably see the unique appearance of these Andid phenotype individuals is incredible. So let's get into the facial analysis of the Andid phenotype Chad. First of all, they have a light to dark olive brown skin tone. It's like a little bit lighter than some of the other ones, but it has more of a range. They typically have a low quantity of body hair, and they have straight to slightly wavy hair texture. They have black hair, typically, there obviously is always a range here, and their eye color is a dark brown hue. Their eye dimensions typically are 3.5 width to 1 height, meaning they're very squinty and they're middle set, and they have infrequent epicanthic folds. This isn't to say that they don't have a slight Mongolian eye appearance, it's just that they're not traditional in a sense of pure epicanthic folding, it's kind of in between, and this is because of that incredible East Asian admixture that's present in all Native American phenotypes. In terms of eye spacing, they have 103% of one eye width apart with an ES ratio of 0.46, meaning that they have relatively average eye spacing. Additionally, they have a nasal index on average, which is 68, which is a mildly leptorine nose. You would think at a first glance, oh, that's narrow, it's not that big, but they actually tend to be very large and often hooked, which is a very unique Andid trait to have. Moving on, they have medium projection. Here's a Quechua man blowing going into a conch shell, and you can see that there's a lot of forward growth there. In terms of cranial height, they're hypsocranic, meaning they're tall skulled, and they have a cephalic ratio which is mesocephalic to brachycephalic, meaning it's slightly shallow. They're mesoprosopic with a facial index of 85% on average, meaning they have medium face width. They have the longest mid-face out of all the native phenotypes of a 1.1 length to 1 width. They have quite full lips, and they have a balanced chin philtrum ratio with a chin length of 2.1 relative to a 1 philtrum length, which is partly due to the longer nose covering up some of the philtrum. They have average jaw development, and they're short in height. Additionally, they're mesoscelic, meaning they have a balanced medium dorsal length, and they're medium to large framed with a large thorax, which is a direct adaptation to the high altitude, thin air environment that they live in. And so here we go, the masculine Andid, all the way over to a more feminine looking one. They tend to have slightly softer features on average, except for their nose, meaning that they have a prettier appearance overall, even from the more masculine zone. All uniquely attractive. So now we fly over to the lagged phenotype Chad, an ancient South American type indigenous to the mountains, steppes, and coastal regions stretching from Brazil to Patagonia. Possibly one of the oldest Native American phenotypes, the lagged is believed to have arrived with some of the earliest Paleolithic migrations into the Americas. One of the notable groups of the lagged phenotype are the Guarani peoples. The lagged phenotype contains a lot of archaic, robust features which are admixed now all across Brazil in some of these different areas like Paraguay. As you can see on this population map, it's very much dispersed, and many of these areas which had nomadic tribes previously are either extinct now, unfortunately, or heavily admixed into other groups. I drew upon the Guarani because they have the closest morphological physical appearance to this lagged phenotype, and there's this notable blue overlap in population here. You can really see the resemblance, the more robust cheekbones, the deep set eyes, slightly lighter eyebrows despite all this. Another Guarani male, again, is that he's a very masculine appearing face, high sexual dimorphism. And I really wanted to showcase here the Aboriginal South American cultural groups that existed before colonialism, mostly nomadic tribes in these regions where the lagged phenotype archaic features exist. So on to the analysis of the lagged phenotype. They have a medium to dark copperish brown skin tone. I would argue that this is the darkest phenotype typically in all of the Americas. They have a low quantity of body hair, and their hair texture is straight to wavy. Additionally, they have black hair color on average, and in terms of eye color, a dark brown. It's the only Native American type which have really deep set eyes, with squinty eye proportions of 3.3 width to 1 height. They have infrequent epicanthic folding. It does happen to a degree, and this again is due to their East Asian admixture. In terms of eye spacing, they have 115% of one eye would depart for their eye spacing ratio, and an ES ratio which is 0.45. So this is average eye spacing, yet really small eye size. In terms of nasal index, the lagged phenotype has a nasal index of 82. This means they have a mesorhine to platyrhine nose, the widest out of all the native phenotypes. They have medium nasal projection forward, it's relatively flat, and they're hypsocranic or tall skulled. Their cephalic ratio is dolichocephalic to mesocephalic. That means that they're slightly deep skulled, and they're mesoprosopic with a facial index of 80%. This is a medium face width. They have a relatively compact mid-face of 1.03 height to 1 width, and they have quite full lips. Additionally, they have a balanced chin philtrum ratio of 2.2 chin length to 1 philtrum length, and a high dimorphism, robust jaw. They're short in height, and they're mesoscelic, sometimes even brachyscelic, meaning they have slightly long limbs relative to the torso. Finally, they're medium to large framed. So here's a more masculine lagged all the way over to the more feminine or prettier boy version. Boom, all three of them. Look at those faces, incredible. Alright, so back to our map, and look at that long hair. Doesn't suit him as much because he's more masculine, I would say. And finally, the Patagonid phenotype Chad. This South American type is native to the grasslands of Patagonia and the Pampas. Some extinct varieties display the greatest natural body mass of all humans. The most characteristic Patagonid once dominated the cool plains of Patagonia before being pushed back by the Mapuche and Europeans. Massive other groups like the extinct Tyremenin likely stood exceptionally tall. Today, traces remain in mixed Tehulchi and slightly fugid admixed Selknam, whose last full-blooded member died unfortunately in the 1970s. So here is a picture of Selknam children from 1898 that showcases the features of this group in a more neotenous, younger appearing way. The issue with this group is they're unfortunately practically extinct now, meaning that they're heavily admixed into surrounding groups and there just simply isn't enough information on them. Really sad. Here's a map of the indigenous peoples of Tierra del Fuego. Onto the facial analysis of the Patagonid phenotype. So they have a light olive brown skin tone, they have a low quantity of body hair, and their hair texture is straight and rarely wavy. Their hair color is black, and their eye hue is dark brown. Their eye dimensions are typically middle set with squinty eye proportions of 3.2 width to 1 height, and they have frequent epicanthic folding due to their East Asian admixture. Moving on, they have slightly close set eyes. Despite having 102% of one eye width apart for their eye spacing ratio here, their ES ratio is only 0.44, which is quite low. They have a nasal index on average of 72, meaning they have a leptorine to mesorine or slightly narrow to medium nose width, and they have a nasal projection which is low to medium. In terms of cranial height, they're hypsocranic, meaning that they're tall skulled, and they're mesocephalic to brachycephalic, meaning they're slightly shallow skulled. They're mesoprosopic with a facial index of 81%, medium width, and they have a long mid-face very much similar to the Andid phenotype with a 1.09 length to 1 width. They have full lips, and they have a long philtrum of 1.9 chin length relative to philtrum length. They have a large face overall. In this photo, you might find that it looks more narrow than some of their other phenotypes, but the reality is their head in general is just very big. It's an illusion that it looks smaller. And they're very tall. Finally, they have the largest body mass and structure worldwide out of all groups because they're both tall and built. Here's a more masculine Patagonid phenotype male all the way over to a more pretty boy version, both equally attractive in differing and unique ways due to the importance of dimorphism. This topic is a very, very complicated topic. Without some form of genetic information, it can be tremendously difficult to pinpoint your exact ethnicity. Our approach embraces a unity gradient model, recognizing that phenotypic traits exist on a continuum rather than as rigid categories, while also acknowledging that distinctions do in fact exist. For example, geographic and land barriers such as the Himalayan mountains have led certain groups to develop more distinct features due to geographic isolation for lengthy periods of time. To illustrate our phenotype-based application functions by aligning individuals with multiple phenotypes at varying percentages. This is because most people on this planet are mixed and contain multiple different phenotypes. And what makes this analysis unique is that the ranges for specific traits dynamically adjust as these percentages are modified. Ironically, at a first glance, the software may appear to use boxes. It operates fundamentally as a continuum model, reflecting the complexity and fluidity of human ethnicity. For example, someone who is 80% Armenian and 20% Ethiopian will have a unique range of values on this continuum, literally tailored to that specific blend. Now consider a hypothetical individual who is 1/4 Congolese, 1/4 Nilotic, 1/4 Mediterranean, and 1/4 Persian. If this individual inherited a higher proportion of traits influenced by dominant alleles, often observed in many African ethnicities, these percentages could be weighted more heavily, say 30% or more for each African phenotype, rather than being constricted to fixed percentages or a single group. This approach highlights the true complexity and fluidity of human ethnic diversity. My software is specifically designed to embrace this diversity, dynamically adapting to reflect the rich and nuanced reality of human variation. At Chadified, we recognize the beauty of the world. Anyone can be attractive from anywhere in the world. And now we zoom out of South America, taking a view of all the South and North American native phenotypes. What an amazing animation. And now a comparison of the morphological phenotypic traits of all North and South American phenotypes, with a special visitor who's none other than the stereotypical Chad. I am by no means stating that the stereotypical Chad is optimal, but I'm rather using it as a reference point to understand how different some of these people look in comparison. On to skin tone, boom. Most of these North and South American phenotypes possess undertones of the skin which vary tremendously. The Eskimid, the Pacifid, the Silvid, the Amazonid, and the Lagid all possess yellow and reddish undertones for the skin, whereas the Centralid has a more yellow undertone and the Margid has a much more red undertone. All of these phenotypes, with the exception of maybe the Eskimid, are more tanned than our stereotypical Chad. Body hair. Boom. Native American phenotypes typically possess very little body hair, with the exception of the Pacifid having a bit more, but it pales in comparison to our stereotypical Chad. Hair texture. Boom. Most Native American phenotypes have anywhere from a coarse straight hair, especially the Eskimid, to a slight wave. This is kinda similar to our stereotypical Chad, who can sometimes have curlier hair. On to hair color. Boom. Very different from our stereotypical Chad, with most of the Native American phenotypes always having black hair, with specific exceptions of course, and a slight range for both the Pacifid and the Silvid. Eye color, mostly all dark brown eyes, with a slight range in the hue of the brown for the Eskimid and Silvid. That said, very rarely would they ever have blue or green eyes without the help of some rare mutation. Eye dimensions. Boom. The Pacifid, the Silvid, the Eskimid, the Centralid. All these phenotypes have squintier eye proportions. The stereotypical Chad also has a squinty eye proportion, but it's not due to epicanthic folding, it's more related to their hunter eye appearance. Eye folds, boom. This is directly related to epicanthic folding. The Eskimids almost always have epicanthic folding due to their East Asian admixture. Same with the Patagonid, which is interesting because the Patagonid is the southernmost American phenotype, yet they do have strong epicanthic folding. The other phenotypes of Native America are in the middle, being frequent and sometimes infrequent as well. Eye spacing, if you notice the jingling going on there, that means that these phenotypes' eyes, despite being average spacing, are small eye size. This is due to their eye spacing ratio percentage in between their eyes being very high, even though their ES ratio is in a typical average zone. This applies to the Eskimid, the Pacifid, the Amazonid, and the Lagid. On the other hand, the Silvid, the Margid, and even the Patagonid have closer set eyes. Many Native American phenotypes have this range and typically are on the closer eye spacing area in contrast to all the other phenotypes in the world. Nasal index. You get a bit of a range here, with the Amazonid and the Lagid, notably the more robust phenotypes of the Native American regions, having the broadest or widest noses, whereas the other phenotypes have slightly smaller or leptorine noses. Interestingly though, the Andid phenotype, despite having a slightly leptorine or thinner nose, has an oversized nose in both directions. Gigantic nose. Nasal projection, now you're seeing that the Andid, although slightly on the more leptorine thinner side, has much more projection. Same with the Margid and the Lagid, again, those robust features, they really play a role here. And then the Eskimid has the lowest because it's the most East Asian in morphological physical appearance. Obviously, stereotypical Chad scores the highest with high nasal projection. Skull breadth, or the width of the face, boom, there's a huge range for literally every single phenotype. The Centralid typically does have the widest, most compact face out of all the Native American phenotypes, leading into mid-face ratio, where again the Centralid is the most compact, tying with the 1-to-1 ratio of this stereotypical Chad. The Eskimid has the largest range, and this is due to that phenotype having the biggest connection to East Asian phenotypes who all have a massive range. Most Native American phenotypes do have a slightly longer mid-face ratio. This could be connected to their close-set eyes. Lip size, anywhere from being on the thinner lip size all the way to full lips, is the typical Native American appearance. Obviously, there's going to be exceptions to this rule, but it's not all over the board like it is for African phenotypes, where there's a huge range here. Chin-philtrum ratio. Boom! Every single Native American phenotype is slightly below average for the chin-philtrum ratio, meaning that they typically do have longer philtrums. And just scanning across this board right now, it's inherently obvious that they all have a slightly longer philtrum length. But this doesn't make them less attractive. In fact, it makes them more attractive for their given phenotype, because this is literally how they evolved to be. The Eskimid, the Pacifid, the Margid, and the Patagonid have the shortest chin-philtrum ratio due to having the longest philtrum length. The Lagid, being more robust, is the closest to the stereotypical Chad. And onto stature. Boom! What an interesting oh my god moment, where the Patagonid is one of the tallest groups in all of the world, literally rivaling that of the Dinka tribe or Nilotic phenotype of Africa. Just incredible. Interestingly though, many of the Native American phenotypes are bordering on pigmatized size, like the Centralid being extremely short. And finally, frame. Boom! The Eskimid is large frame, similar to the Siberian, with high muscular content. The Patagonid has the highest body mass of any phenotype, which is a combination of their extreme stature and also incredible width. On the other hand, the Margid, the Centralid, and Amazonid, including the Andid and Lagid, have a wide range of body types. After investing more than 6 months into research and development, my initial vision of creating a singular, comprehensive video on ethnicity became impractical. We're gonna have to break this series up into multiple parts. The ultimate map to male facial attractiveness. Thank you all for watching, and I'll talk to you guys next time.